Appreciate everyone joining us after lunch. Be sure and check that you're in the right place because this Rome wasn't built in a day, the role of education and economic development. I know there was a little bit of confusion on some of that, but once you're here, we'll lock the door and you can't leave. No, we're good. So it's great to see everyone here. I think it's going to be a great panel, and I want to go ahead and get us started because there's a lot we want to engage in. You'll notice that there one of us missing. Representative Dan Branch will be here a little later.
He'll be here in about 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I do that. So we're good. You need to.
I'm just going to get Catherine's presentation up.
Okay,
and
perfect.
Be good to go.
All right. Well, while she's doing that, getting the presentation in place, let me go ahead and introduce. We're going to start with Catherine Truitt, who's the state superintendent for North Carolina, who's really going to kind of tee up the conversation for the rest of the panel today. Look forward to the conversation. We'll then once we wrap that up, we'll take a few minutes and really kind of comment on what the implications this is about education and economic development and how we work together. Want to just a couple of things about the superintendent. She's a former classroom teacher, so she brings that experience. Was also the state chancellor for Western Governors University for the state of North Carolina. So brings that great mix of higher education, public education, as well as understanding of the economy and workforce and what the needs are. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Superintendent. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. It's so great to be here with you all, and I'm excited that you've come to hear a presentation that might be a little bit ambiguous from the title. But certainly what I'm going to talk about for the next 15 minutes is the challenges and solutions in how our K-12 system of public education is and is not impacting our country's ability to grow its economy. And so while the message this morning is actually one that's not full of a lot of great news, there are some solutions on the horizon, and I'm looking forward to sharing them with you and have provided you with all of the references that you'll need to look at the data I'm going to share and make it relevant to your own part of the country. So I'd like to start with a rhetorical question, and that is, what is the purpose of a public K-12 education? Some of you may think off the top of your head it's to prepare young people to become critical thinkers, or maybe you think it's to prepare students to be good citizens or to safeguard our democracy. I still believe, I've been in education for close to 30 years now. It's the only job I've ever had. And I firmly believe still that in this country, the most surest way to economic prosperity and freedom is still through education. But I believe that the purpose of a K-12 education is to eventually prepare a child to be a productive member of the workforce. And unfortunately, what I have come to believe, and lots of others as well, is that the system that we have to educate children through their kindergarten through 12th grade journey doesn't work for most students. In fact, what I will tell you is that it only works for about a third of students. And I know that because I was just talking to Joe here about the data. What does the data tell us? In God we trust, all others bring data. And I have brought data today. So a lot of times we think about the success of education through the high school graduation metric. And here is a snapshot of high school graduation rates in our country. And you can see here that it ranges anywhere from about 84%, this is coming out of the pandemic, 84% to 94%. We actually saw high school graduation rates not change very much during the pandemic, even though test scores dropped immensely. So my home state of North Carolina, where I serve as the state superintendent, we have about an 88% high school graduation rate. Texas, you'll see, has about an 84% high school graduation rate. And if we look, what I know is that the high school graduation rate is not a proxy for success, right? Just because you graduate from high school doesn't mean that you are going to be successful in the post-secondary plans of your choice. And here, if we look at, these are the top 10 states for high school graduation, okay? They are pretty much all northern states. And when we look at top 10 education attainment rates, adults 25 to 64 with either a 2 or 4 year or higher degree, we see that there's a little bit of correlation, but not a lot. There are lots of states that are on here that are not on this list, and a couple that are. And so if we drill, the one way that you can look to see whether or not your students in your state are graduating from high school and getting the training and education that they need is through the National Student Clearinghouse. And so we can make sure, Catherine, right, that everybody gets the slides?
Absolutely.
Yep. And so there's the website for the tracker. But if you're not familiar with this tool, it can tell you where and how long, where all of your students went in your state after high school, how long they persisted, and if they persisted, and what their major was, and if they graduated with any kind of 2 or 4 year degree. It will also tell you if they were enrolled in a community college and earned a credential as opposed to an associate degree. But what it will not tell you is if they got like a coding certificate from a coding boot camp. That's a separate data set. And what we learn when I look at this information for North Carolina, the green right here tells me what percentage of kids actually enrolled after high school in either at a community college or a 4 year institution. So 65.5% of our kids enrolled, okay? The orange tells me who persisted over this period of time, from 2014-15 school year to the 2021-22 school year. And the yellow tells me who is no longer enrolled and hasn't graduated. So you can see here how we lose people year after year. And in fact, a study done at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill showed that half of the kids who stop out of public universities in North Carolina had a GPA that allowed them to continue. There were other factors that caused them to stop out. And so what this tells me is when I add the top bar, which is the dark purple, to the top bar are kids who didn't enroll in anything that we know of. Nothing they could have gone and gotten a truck driving license, but in terms of a 2 or a 4 year institution, 34% did not enroll. When I add the top two together, I get about 50%. So 50% are not getting a 2 or a 4 year degree or credential from a 2 year institution. And I looked up Texas, and it's about the same as North Carolina. But I will tell you that Dallas ranks if you take the top 25 metro areas and look at education attainment, Dallas ranks 18 out of 25. So about 40% of Dallas residents between the ages of 24 and 64 have some post-secondary degree, and 37% in Houston do. And if I want to fine-tune this even more, this is specific to North Carolina. We have a post-secondary education attainment goal that sits in legislation. So we partnered again with Chapel Hill to get this information. So here's our 13% don't complete high school on time, 39 graduate, but do not even start at anything within a year after graduating. 11 enroll but do not return for a second year Again, it's that persistence issue. 9 return but do not earn a degree or credential in 6 years. And at the end of the day, again, this is not just 2 or 4 year, this is any kind of workforce credential, including degrees. Only 28% of our seniors who graduate this year will get any kind of degree or credential of workforce value by the time they're 24. This is not okay. And what I will tell you is that in Texas and North Carolina are similar. We are states that are seeing a lot of in-migration. People want to move to Texas and to North Carolina. And North Carolina we've always been able to meet our workforce demand because of people moving to North Carolina from other states. But in my role, I feel like I have a moral obligation to educate the people who live in my state. And so this is very concerning. And so now I want to transition to how did we get here? This is something that, what I'm going to talk about next is something that has gotten a lot of attention in the media lately. And you're going to continue to see this get attention in policy and legislative sessions at the state level for the next several years. And that is something called the science of reading. So I'm going to talk about reading, reform, and readiness. So in the 80s, long story short, this country moved away from a phonics-based approach to early literacy instruction in favor of something called whole language. And as a result, California actually mandated it first, and by the mid-90s, they ranked last in the state, in the country for reading, for literacy rates. Prior to the pandemic, 67% of 8th graders in North Carolina were starting 9th grade not reading proficiently. And when we disaggregate that, we see that about 23% of Hispanic students are reading proficiently when they start 9th grade, and only 12% of African American students. So what kind of chance does someone have to become an entrepreneur or do anything else if they can't read proficiently? So, and I looked up Texas. I looked up Texas's NAEP scores, and they are about the same as North Carolina. So that 67%, that's average in the US. We rank in the middle of the pack nationally for reading and math, internationally for reading and math. And it is because the dominant form of early literacy instruction in this country is whole language. And whole language says, look at the picture, and Joe, if I ask you what this is, what might you say?
A horse in the field.
A horse in the field. Okay, what else might you say? Diana, what might you say? A pony, right. So I would say a pony, but let's say it says horse. We're trying to teach children to memorize, to learn to read by memorizing words, and it is not grounded in cognitive science, and we've known this for 2 decades now, but our universities continue to turn out teachers who have not learned a phonics-based approach to early literacy instruction. So I worked with the legislature right after I took office to rewrite our 3rd grade reading legislation, and we have begun providing professional development to all pre-K through 5th grade teachers in the science of reading. We've trained 44,000 teachers to date. The first third of them are just finishing up this 18-month training. Then there was a second cohort that's halfway through, and then the third cohort will finish next year. And our data on a reading diagnostic test that all students in our state take in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grades has been showing that we're growing faster than the rest of the nation. And that was only 6 months into teachers having had this training. And we were able to pull out kids, look at the data from the kids who were from the 3rd cohort, whose teachers hadn't started the training, and the kids with the teachers who had started the training well outperformed the kids who hadn't. So what I can tell you now is that we're gray and the rest of the country is green. This is a diagnostic test that's given in all 50 states. It's given to over 1 million kindergarten through 3rd graders in the US. And as of February, North Carolina kindergarten through 3rd graders have outpaced the rest of the country. So what we are doing is working. And there are about 20 states right now that have filed legislation around this. The next thing that we need to do differently is move away, not replace, but add to the testing culture that our students live in. We use for federal and most states, Texas actually has a great state accountability model, but our federal and state accountability models are very much grounded in one and done high stakes testing that occurs on one day at the end of the year or at the end of the semester. And what I would say is that we should never move away from accountability. We need to add to it. We need to be holding schools accountable for more than just test scores. We need to be holding them accountable for chronic absenteeism. If kids are not at school, they're not going to learn. We need to hold them accountable for school climate, parent satisfaction, lots of other things besides just testing. And then finally, what I'll say is that we are graduating kids who are not prepared to develop the skills that they need to be successful in life. America Succeeds is a nonprofit that has set up what we used to call soft skills, they call durable skills. And we were able to go in and look at, answer the question, how has the workforce evolved? Because we know that education has not evolved, right? K-12 education looks exactly the same today as it did over 100 years ago. So we looked at 2.8 million job postings and looked to see what the durable skills that employers were demanding. And we ended up creating a portrait of a graduate that's grounded in durable skills so that teachers can start weaving these things into what they're doing. And if you can't see them, they are adaptability, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, empathy, learner's mindset, and personal responsibility. If teachers can have permission to weave these things in and assess students and help them grow, and we can start to reorient the purpose of K-12 education away from the purpose of third grade is to get ready for fourth grade, the purpose of sixth grade is to get ready for seventh grade, and start helping all parents and kids see that every student is on a career journey, starting with kindergarten. So I'm going to take my place on the panel now, and I hope that that does spark our conversation, Joe, and thank you very much for listening.
Can you hear me? Okay, that's Catherine. Thank you so much for teeing us up, and a lot to think about. I thought it was interesting on your last slide, and I didn't get them all down: adaptability, communication, collaboration, empathy, learner's mindset, and personal responsibility are the very things I'm hearing in other sessions about the needs for employees and what really matters in today's workforce, which I think is really what gets us to the role of education and economic development and how the two tie together. Right now we're seeing a lot of criticism in the press about, do you really need post-secondary credentials or what matters today? But no one's arguing that people don't need skills. More than ever at any point in time. And I want to tee up the panel here, and I'm going to kind of do this one at a time. Delighted to have Dan Branch with us today, attorney here in Dallas with over 2 decades of work. I knew him first as in the Texas House of Representatives, where he was an education leader, really focusing on higher education policy as it relates to the need. But he's also formerly served as the Texas Public Finance Authority chairman under Governor Bush when he was Dan. And then let's just kind of start with this intersection of education and economic development. And from your perspective, why does this really matter today? And why are we even talking about this topic as such?
Well, I applaud Catherine for your efforts in North Carolina. I know Margaret Spellings, who's we sent to North Carolina, has come back, and Governor Jim Hunt, who I've spent a lot of time with and served on some boards. And so North Carolina is well known for its education leadership, and sounds like you're leading the charge and continuing that tradition. So thank you for that. But I would say that if it's not readily self-evident, I used to tell people that were testifying in front of the higher ed committee, if they said something really obvious, I would probably impertinently say, you have a firm grasp on the self-evident. And I think maybe it's not obvious, but it should be obvious that, education is transformative. Education is what allows people to rise up, and therefore, ultimately, people that are working and being entrepreneurs and being productive, that's how you measure GDP. I mean, developed countries with large populations, they have the largest GDP, and China's coming up on us very quickly in this century. That's sort of the story of the 21st century right now. So Texas has a program, 60 by 30, 60% of the workforce by 2030, needs to have these skill sets. And we've been largely relying on inbound migration for our skills. And fortunately or not, depending on your perspective, we're able to satisfy all these job requirements, higher skilled jobs with people that are flocking to Texas, and not just California, and not just New York, but all over. And so that's allowing employers to fill their needs, but. With 5.5 million students in the public education system, we're 8% of the U.S. population, but we're 10. I think last I looked, we were about 10% of the student population. We're the youngest, and we have the most students. We therefore greater responsibility to educate this cohort, and we need to allow these students who are increasingly Hispanic and less Anglo to be prepared for these skills. And I would say the other piece of that, I spent a lot of time when I left 6 years on public ed committee and then 6 years chairing higher ed. I spent a lot of time on not just the transfer of knowledge, but the creation of knowledge. And one of the roles of higher ed is research, and then that leads to innovation, the creativity, and new ideas and new businesses, new jobs. And so we were way behind California, Texas as the second largest state, and moving up quickly the last 20 years on California and our population. We're now over 30 million. I think California is around 39 million. We're the 9th largest economy in the world. If we were a separate country and we're walking into the Olympic Stadium as a country, we would have the 9th largest delegation. I think California would have the 5th or 6th largest. So it's amazing that 13 colonies have started this. Now the two economic juggernauts are on the West Coast and the Southwest. But we needed to catch up. We were way behind California, way behind New York, and we went from 3 Carnegie R1 level research universities after I passed this legislation called House Bill 51. And it incentivized through a series of different approaches, incentivized giving in the private sector and the public sector into research. We now have 10 R1 research universities, and we have shot up in all the research grants that we get in order to, and so places like Austin and College Station and Rice, which dominated. Now you have UT El Paso and UT Dallas and UT Arlington and University of North Texas and University of Texas San Antonio, and all these universities are now research level R1 universities. And so that's the other part. Besides just making sure you have the skill set for the economic development to fill the jobs, you also need to have the research and attract the talent and the ideas and the creativity, and that's what. And I would say final point is these skills that you're talking about. As a democracy, it's not just about jobs and skills. It's about being owners of the society and responsible citizens. And if you don't raise up, if you go back and look at the history of Texas, the history of a lot of the East Coast states, North Carolina included, we had a lot of people that came to Texas from North Carolina, maybe running from creditors or jail or worse. But there was a bunch of hardy souls that ended up here, but one thing they understood was the importance of education. And one of the reasons we separated from Mexico in 1836, go look in the Declaration of Independence, Mexico failed to create a system of public education for the general diffusion of knowledge. And so it's embedded in our DNA that you have to have a an educated citizenry in order to have a democracy. Because if the citizens are running the show, they have to be responsible. Otherwise, we fail. So it's not just a job, it's your role as a citizen to direct the community and the state.
Great. Thanks, Dan. And let me, Diane, I want to jump to you on here. Diane Diaz-Harrison founded the Arizona Autism Charter Schools, which just chatting with her, incredibly impressive work. And on top of that, has founded the Autism Charter School Accelerator, which is expanding that opportunity throughout the country. You know, one of the things I'm so mindful of, and really glad to have you part of the panel, because you know, when we talk about education, we talk about who's being left behind. There's a group of the population we just, I think, for a long time took for granted we were leaving behind, and those with neurological disorders, other disabilities, and would like to maybe just share a little bit about what you do, but also talk about the work and how you see it tying into the overall economy and the role that plays.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to be included in the discussion to speak to the increase in awareness about neurodiversity, autism spectrum being a growing neurodiversity with 1 in 36 children diagnosed across the nation, the fastest growing neurodiversity. And schools are just behind on seeing kids as gifted learners, perhaps unique learners, people with learning differences, but nevertheless, very capable and also with rights to be fulfilled, productive citizens. So my charter school was started on that premise. I wanted a school where my son would not be seen as just a disabled learner. You know, I got tired of going to meetings where I was told, oh, he can't do this, he can't do that. I already know what he can't do. We're in school so that we can build something on his strengths. And I quickly learned that most parents of children on the autism spectrum and special needs parents in general wanted the same thing, and the school system was just too slow. So I was very lucky to be in the state of Arizona where school choice is such a great option. You know, I did pitch the idea to education perhaps bureaucrats that, you know, thought it was just too much of a litigious project pursuit, because that's just the nature of special education. But, you know, at the end of the day, I didn't care about any of that. I just knew there had to be a better way where children with neurodiversities were prioritized and were not left out in the margins to do just unstimulating things throughout the day. So started my first school in 2014. 2 years later, we just couldn't keep up with demand in that school. Started a second school. 2 years later, a third school. So those are all in the Phoenix metro area. We're starting a new school in the fall in Tucson, Arizona. And through a fantastic partnership with the Yaz Prize, I just see my team over there. We were nationally recognized, and through that recognition, we're able to start the National Accelerator of Autism Charter Schools with the goal of opening an autism charter in every major city in America. And we are well on our way to do that. Yes, so we do workforce development, we do entrepreneurship, we really have a strength-based program. We have a group starting a school in Louisiana. In the fall, we have a school here in Texas, Thrive with Autism, that is expanding from a small little, 50-student school to a bigger campus. Also, they're having a hard time keeping up with demand. And meeting tomorrow with a group from Las Vegas to start a school there. And I think it just really speaks to the growing number of people, parents and families, who want their children to be challenged, to know that the end game is for them to be fulfilled, productive citizens. And more often than not, our kids are left out. So if somebody had to prioritize these kiddos, it was going to be me. And I'm just grateful for the challenge, for the privilege, and to be able to put these kids in the forefront because they are brilliant learners and they are, really game-changing in terms of workforce because they are uniquely suited for entrepreneurship, for, seeing things that neurotypical people don't see, for solving problems. And if we see them that way and create paths for that success, we've had our first and now our second graduating class, and we are delivering. They are on to their next chapter in a successful way, and we just want that opportunity across the nation.
Congratulations, great work, thank you. And yeah, applaud. That's inspirational. Thanks. And I know we have some follow-up, but I want to go ahead and Carl and Dr. Carl Rossini Jr. is a professor of academic or in the academic area of marketing at Collin College, just north of us here. Glad to have you here. He brings both a background not only in teaching but also in the workforce, having worked in that area in a number of with different companies and supported that work. And Carl, I want to kind of turn to you because you're in the classroom, you're working with students at the college level who are in your case in the field of marketing, hopefully preparing for jobs that are out there. Talk about, as a faculty member, how you think about both what you do in the classroom with your students and then connecting them to the broader economy of the world of work, and how you see that from a faculty perspective.
Thank you. First, I wanted to share how impressed I am with your leadership and your passion. You're really a role model for me about getting things done. Appreciate that. One of the things that we focus on is we're trying to change the culture between one that's actually talking about awards, like getting a bachelor's degree or some specific degree, and more broaden the culture to skills. What skills does industry want? What skills can we deliver? We have 2 certificates. We have a certificate in digital marketing. We have a certificate in marketing and sales. We have an associate's degree, and then we pass on our students mostly to University of North Texas, Frisco, where they get a BAS and a variety of things, including e-commerce. But I think that what industry is looking for are people that have the skills, reading, logic, communication, science, and math. They're looking for students that are really workforce ready. But one of the ways that we do this is we have committees and groups from industry specifically telling us the skills that they want, and these include what sometimes they're called soft skills, which include teamwork, written communication, verbal communication. And the exciting thing is that students really want to be plugged in. They want internship opportunities. They want co-op opportunities. They want to show their work in portfolios. And they're eager to enter the world of work. Sometimes they enter the world of work, even when they're freshmen, sophomores, juniors, part-time, or doing something entrepreneurial. So that's exciting. And it's exciting for me to see this panel that are really focused on raising up skills, because I think those are going to become even more important every day.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. I want to turn back to you because I'm just struck as I think about some of the disconnects that we see out there in terms of what's going on. So you can increase, and we've proven it as a nation, we can increase the number of high school graduates and do that dramatically without really increasing college graduates during that time. I mean, you just showed that in a slide, the variance between the two, and frankly, that college graduation rate really hasn't grown much in the last 50 years. It's upticked a little bit, but not a whole lot. So from your perspective, and Dan, I'm going to come back to you, same kind of question there. So what is the cause of the disconnect between the two? Because we seem to be confused about what problem I think sometimes we're trying to solve in terms of preparing people for the workforce and to be able to participate in society.
I think that the disconnect comes from the narrative that the only pathway to the middle class in this country is a 4-year residential college degree that you begin immediately after high school. You know, we're the only country that does university that way. I think, you know, I don't want to criticize our current system of higher education, but there's a lot there that needs modernizing. And one of the things that I always loved about WGU, and I know there's a WGU Texas as well, is 75% of our students belong to one or more underserved groups. And we're talking, you know, folks who are returning to this asynchronous online education with mentorship for every student, while 85% work full-time. And these are folks who were not able to be successful for whatever reason the first time around that they tried to earn a degree. But I think even before the pandemic, and this has certainly been exacerbated by the pandemic, we really are on the cusp of moving towards a more competency or skills-based approach. I mean, WGU is a 100% competency-based university. You're not acquiring credit hours, you're acquiring skills and competencies. And even the Carnegie unit, the Carnegie Foundation announced last week that they are working with ETS, Education Testing Services, to rework the Carnegie unit. The problem with the way, this is what I sort of alluded to in my presentation, one of the reasons that the system doesn't work and why so few people are getting an advanced degree is because the system is designed to, it assumes that all kids are going to go to college. The way you accumulate credits, the courses that you have to take, and the truth is that there are lots of other options, but parents don't understand what those options are, and they don't understand the financial implications of that 4-year degree, and then they don't understand what the salaries are that are attached to those jobs that don't necessarily require a 4-year degree. And so I think that you're right. When we look at the bottom quartile of wage earners in our country, we've only about 11% of people from the bottom quartile income bracket actually send their children to 4-year college. So I don't know that the system of higher ed needs to change, K-12 needs to change, and change is very, very difficult in education. Just ask a principal who tries to change a bus schedule. I mean, it's very, very difficult and slower than the molasses in January.
Dan, same question.
Well, when I spent time in the public ed space and equal sort of time in my 12 years when I represented this area in downtown Dallas and Austin. And so I came across it from the perspective of K-12 and from higher ed. And so one of the things I remember learning as someone who sort of came in from a legal background and not necessarily an education policy background was that just because someone graduated from high school, which we're working on improving those rates, that did not equate to being ready for college level readiness. And so that was sort of when I went to conferences around the country, Education Commission of the States, Southern Regional Education Board, et cetera, that was sort of like headline one in all these conferences is that no longer does high school graduation equate to college readiness. So my mind was, well, how come? Well, because a lot of these students don't have the skills, and when they go to try into community college or a 4-year undergraduate degree, they have to take developmental ed. And developmental ed you don't get credit for. And the way developmental ed was structured was you would take the whole course and these people would bog down again, let's say if it was math on fractions, instead of giving intensity on fractions and fixing that problem and then bringing you back in to do credit courses where you are a little more excited as a student and were feeling like you're getting traction. A lot of these students were then just bailing out because they weren't getting credit and they were running into the same old problems, and they had to go a full semester, and there wasn't sort of concentrated, targeted efforts to fix whatever the deficiency was, and then matriculate into. So to me, that was one of the reasons we were having a disconnect, and it plays into what Catherine's saying, is that there's other pathways, and I would go down to schools like one of your campuses, El Centro, or go down to the Texas Tech Technical College in Waco, where at the time part of that Texas State Technical College campus in Waco was where Air Force One was landing. They had an airfield and a whole aviation program because President Bush when he would fly into Crawford. And so they had all things going on, but you would go around the campus and they couldn't keep students in for 2 years because employers were grabbing them out to do culinary skills, to you name it, EMS technicians, nursing, all the different skills. They literally couldn't keep them in, so we weren't getting the AA degree in the statistic because someone could go off and make, back then, $70,000, $80,000, and that was very attractive, changed their family and the lifestyle. So again, even when you got people into the higher ed system, the demand for jobs and skills was taking them out early.
Yeah, we used to have a little saying that last welder you want to hire is the one that got the degree. But
that's right. Then it was welding was $120,000, and you're like, hey, you do the math. So anyway, so that to me so you'd say, where was the problem? High school wasn't elementary, K-12 wasn't preparing the student fully. Okay, that was a crit. Then the K-12 would reach out to higher ed and say, well, higher ed's, it's the education departments who are creating the teachers who are not preparing our students. So it was circular, and you could point the finger at either higher ed or K-12, but the bottom line was we weren't measuring up, and then so then a lot of the reaction was, okay, we need to have more testing. Well, you know how that went over with a lot of moms and homes, and it wasn't. There was some rationality to that there was too much testing or testing to the test, and so at some point you had the accountability people who were wanting more statistics, wanting more testing, wanting to hold people accountable. Meanwhile, you had a sort of a reaction to that, saying too much testing, and therefore you're going to move back to more social promotion. So that's the tension we're in.
And still there in a lot of places. Dan, I want to jump to you on something because and listening to your story and talking about your perseverance and looking at how to meet the needs of your son and other children and youth that with a similar situation. What have you learned from that we could apply to other underserved populations that are generally not also getting the same quality of education, not having those opportunities to both graduate and enter the workforce as productive citizens in the same way?
Yeah, I believe there's so much to learn from kids on the spectrum because when learning is not relevant to them, you're going to know. If they're bored, if what they're learning doesn't apply, if they're not able to apply it in an area of their interest, they're definitely going to let you know. And so that's why you see, explosive behaviors or just boredom or just lack of engagement. But the way we teach our kids is by giving them a ton of foundational skills, to help them with the gaps, and then allowing them the agency to apply those skills in project-based learning. And that's where the magic happens. And that is not exclusive to autism. that is good for all kids. That is great for all kids. I was just sharing with Catherine that we have, a growing sector of kids that are neurotypical because, small class sizes, 3-to-1 student-to-staff ratios, project-based learning, amazing STEAM learning. We do a lot of agri-STEAM, which is great. is fantastic and phenomenal for all kids, and that is the direction that is going to help kids be workforce ready. It's more skills-based, and it's more relevant. And just because neurotypicals can tolerate boring instruction or things that are not relevant doesn't mean they should. So we should learn from people on the spectrum and demand, better quality education styles and programming and agency so that all of those basic facts that we learn have relevance and are applicable to something that is of high interest to the person.
Oh, thanks. Well, Carl, I'm going to kind of turn to you because we're talking about readiness. We're talking about disconnects that are there, and you and I chatted a little bit in terms of students coming to you prepared. But a lot of times at community colleges, people kind of forget that a lot of the students you see are older adult students that are coming in your class. Talk a little bit about the students you see you serve and how what motivates them and to pursue their skills, credentials, or whatever their goals are.
Well, to piggyback on something that Diana said, the key is to motivate the students, and one of the things that is exciting about teaching the so-called non-traditional, older than maybe 27, 28 people coming back into the workforce, is they have enough career experience, they have enough military experience, they have enough family experience that they know what they want and they know the credential or the skills they need to get there. So to me, one of the keys is to change the motivation of the student. A motivated student, just like any of us, will go through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get what they want. If someone wants to be a nurse, wants to be a doctor, wants to be an inhalation therapist, they will make it happen. If somebody else has chosen it for them, or somebody else thinks it might be a vaguely good idea, a good rainstorm could stop. So I really think parents and students need to have their culture and mindset change and see where they can plug in. You can be a neurosurgeon, you can be a nurse, you can be an inhalation therapist, you can be a licensed veterinary nurse, you can be an administrator, you can be the person at the help desk when people walk into the hospital. As long as you have a goal and there's training associated with that, then we plug everybody in. I totally agree with this idea, which is basically unknown in Europe and Asia, that everyone gets a bachelor's. That's just not, part of the culture. I think it might have been a reaction from the class system in Britain. I'm not sure where it came from, but much better to have a culture of skills and plugging into industry where you want to go.
Very, very good. Well, we've got 4 minutes and we wrap up. So, I've been fortunate to be part of a lot of recruitment trips, trying to bring companies and organizations into the community. But honestly, it's pretty rare to include educators in that process. So what we're talking about today is a marriage of the two. Why should? Now, let's just go down 1 minute. Why should educators be part of attracting and bringing and retaining companies into communities?
Talent, talent, talent. So the average, when a company is coming to set up shop or expand in a particular area, they want to know, are we going to have the workforce that we need to bring our company here? I got to go to Asheville, North Carolina a couple months ago to see a new Pratt & Whitney 1.2 square million feet of new factory, totally automated. And they have a partnership with the local community college that the kids will come for a 16-hour course for free, paid for by the company, and then they can start to work at this place. And I was able to go and be a part of helping ensure that workforce was going to be there for them.
Perfect. And of course, the employees want good schools for their children, so that's important in the relocation process, and as well as they want the arts. When we're trying to attract people to UT Southwestern here, a lot of doctors and scientists, a big part of that, Dan Podolsky will tell you, is they want to know about the culture of Dallas, and do they have a symphony, and do they have a museum? And so for different type of workers and workforces, you got to have education and the arts.
Great. Oh.
I think it's important for general prosperity to have a strong tax base so that we can serve everyone in the community. We can serve the people that need a safety net. We can serve people with education. We can serve people with hospitals. We can serve people with transportation. So we need that prosperity. To have that prosperity, we need to attract people to pay the taxes.
Dana.
We are definitely a workforce pipeline school. We've connected with all of the tech businesses in our area, and we are a pathway school for those businesses. And I really liked your point about great schools also attract great talent into a community. And I have seen professionals at ASU and Intel take or not take jobs based on their child being picked in a lottery at my school. So it is a fact that these schools are needed everywhere, not only, to educate students that learn differently, neurodiverse kids, but also because parents are demanding this in their communities. So it's kind of a, win-win in every respect.
Couldn't agree more. Great job. Thank the panel. That's super.